don't ban or censor books at schools or public libraries for patrons 6th grade and older. We have a couple of people who said in advance that they would be willing to lead off. I'm super grateful to them for that. The first one is going to be Sherry Haas, speaking the affirmative. Sherry, are you ready to speak? If so, unmute, and you have 4 minutes.
Okay. I'll get my timer set here. This is a compelling topic for me, one that I was really interested in speaking on because books have been an important part of my life, all of my life. I remember the first book that I could read all by myself and my first trip to the library. And I remember wanting to read every book there was in the library. That was a goal of mine. And as I got older, I even wondered why there was a section of the library that I could not go to that was for older students, and what was it in those books that I wasn't able to read or wasn't allowed to read. When I think of book banning, I think of the novel Fahrenheit 451. In that book, the government wanted to limit the knowledge of the people. So it was the job of firemen to collect books that they found in people's houses and burn them. So, which brings up the question, why are books considered to be dangerous? Well, knowledge comes through reading, and knowledge is power. So whether expanding your imagination through fantasy or learning about the past, like the horrors of the Civil War, that knowledge tells us where we've been, and it helps us to figure out where we're headed, where are we going. Governments who want to oppress people limit education, and they will ban books. They want to control the narrative and control what's being taught. Now, I'm glad that this was a 6th grade and up, because those kids, as a mother and as a teacher of K through 12, I know that kids learn from sources other than their parents and often even other than their teachers, and they question what they read. They will reject what doesn't fit for them, and they experience a lot of emotions from what they read. If they are really reading, they are experiencing motivation, maybe they are enraged, empathy. There's lots of different feelings they get from reading, and that's something that they can use to benefit themselves and the world around them. Now, talking about age and maturity, some might think that 6th graders are young. However, if you look at the writers of our Constitution, many of them were very young, in their early 20s. There were teenagers. I found on the Journal of American Revolution, the youngest was actually Andrew Jackson at age 9. We have young people who are very much interested in what's going on in our country, and they have deep convictions. We have that in the past and today too. If given the knowledge that comes from books, they will ask relevant questions and they will expand their thinking about what they are reading. To censor books would be to censor the right to develop that thinking and the ability to form opinions. Also, from knowing that age group, I know that if you tell them they can't have something, they're going to ask why, and they're going to want to find out. They might even read books to find out. And if you ban a book, they might be more likely to want to read that book. Whether it's learning about the world, students also learn more about themselves, how they fit into the world, why they are the way they are, how they're alike and different from other people. They ask, am I normal? So we use other people's experiences to find out if they're same or different than us, and we get that from reading other people's stories.
Okay, wrapping up.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, good. Hands for our speaker. First speaker. All right, way to go. Thank you for leading off. And I see a question from Rachel, is it? You can unmute and ask your question to me. Mhm.
You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was looking up something. Madam Chair, what I would like to ask the Ms. Haas is, did those particular speakers read books such as ones that are in our school, for example, All Boys Aren't Blue? And if so, would she believe that they read content such as this? Sorry, I'm looking it up. I have it right here. Not All Boys Are Blue, in which it details the sexual activity of two cousins, male cousins, having sexual intercourse, describing things such as them giving each other blowjobs, with it describing that the fact of them putting their penises in each other's backsides. So I would like to know, are those the types of books that our forefathers at a young age were reading?
I would say that they did not have books like that at that time. So I would know that I'd be pretty sure that they were not reading books like that. In fact, I'm not sure what kinds of books were available at that time. But we do live in a different age now, and a lot of information is available now that was not available in the past. And we have young people who need to see some content. I'm not saying that they need to see explicit content, but that I would also say maybe should be regulated more by parents than not having it available at all in the libraries and the schools. I know my parents did question some books that I was reading when they would hear something that I was saying from a book that I had read. And then I ended up reading that book later.
So, Madam Chair, I guess my next question is who made the decision on what books were being read? The parents or school board members who had their own political and social agendas?
I think the books that are being read in schools are books that students are finding on their own for the most part, or they are assigned in classes. Books like that would not be assigned in a class at school. I know that from being in the schools that they would not be assigned. It's actually, a lot of students are not picking up books out of the library at school anyway. They are finding more content online, or they're watching videos, movies.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Sherry. Thanks for your answer, Sherry. Yeah, I think
thank you.
Cynthia's reconnecting here on us, but we're going to go to a new question here. We don't usually do follow-up questions, so we're going to move on to the next one. I'm going to call on Sam House. Can you unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A very simple question. Would the speaker see any need whatsoever to ban any books at all? Or would the speaker think that allowing all books is absolutely necessary?
I guess I see difficulties in banning books, because where do you draw a line when you are going to start banning books? And as I said, students they're going to be drawn to different books for different reasons. They're probably not going to pick up certain books anyway, unless they've heard a lot of hype about it, which is one of the points that I made, that if you ban a book and students have found out that it's been banned, they will be curious. They will want to know more about that book, and they might be more likely to pick it up from the library than otherwise. So maybe best to leave them on the shelves and let students do what they're going to do. And if they bring it home, the parents can say, oh, okay, let's talk about this book.
Mm.
All right, thank you. And I'm sorry I dropped off there. Technology, love it. So, staff, is that 2 questions? Natalie says yes. All right. With that, the speaker is thanked. Okay, all right. Hands for our speaker and our questioners. Now we have a speech in the negative, and that is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you can unmute, and you have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comments build on what Sherry just said. We should be regulated more by parents than anybody. Parents are our children's first and sometimes only line of defense. We are definitely our children's first educators. We are not fascist. We are not Nazis. We are not terrorists, because we are doing our job to raise our children in a moral society that we feel is necessary. Educators need to be working with the parents. We need to be a team. We need to work together for the best interest of the children. As has come out already in the questions, there are things that kindergartners don't need to know yet. They're not mature enough to be able to deal with this information. And presenting it to them is a form of child abuse, mental abuse, and we need to stop it. Many educators, not all, many educators have sacrificed the responsibility to educate our children in light of a woke agenda. We are not looking to ban books. Books are still available in bookstores everywhere that you can go. But just as pornography is limited and the public has to seek it out, we are asking that parents get to limit the access of our children to pornography and other agendas that just don't work in the real world. We are asking that we take out of a limited space, we fill a limited space in a school library with books that reasonable people are likely to agree are age appropriate. And not because of a fear of knowledge, but because of a sense of responsibility that children are not ready to handle some pieces of information yet. We know that things like the 1619 Project, which was highly criticized by renowned historians and the National Association of Scholars, historical revisionism was embraced by schools. So even within the educated populace, there is disagreement about what needs to go, and that's where it needs to be the parents' prerogative to be able to choose to keep things away from children that they are not prepared to handle. Administrators and politicians, certainly authors, have no basis for deciding what is right for our children, and businesses like Scholastic are feeding their bottom line. I am so tired of people saying, I'm speaking up for the children who have no voice. If everybody speaks for the children who aren't speaking, who's speaking up for the parents who are speaking? Nobody's listening, and we have to stand up and protect our children from what they don't even know they're not prepared to handle yet. Who gets to decide what is appropriate? Senator John Kennedy asked that question in a hearing. And it was a hearing that you couldn't even see the books that he was asking about because there is a mature content warning. And in order to view the pictures and the dialogue that is printed in the books that we are asking to be removed from school libraries, you have to prove that you're above the age of 18. And these books are put in front of kindergartners. They don't get that choice. Adults don't get that choice. Children don't get that choice because they are not mature enough to be able to make that choice yet. 6th grade is in middle school. in most places, but not all.
Okay,
My
about
own
time to
country,
wrap up.
country.
Yep, yeah, your
Thank
closing
you.
sentence. All right, good. Hands for our speaker. Thank you very much. I'll take a couple of questions in the order I see them. Robin L., you can unmute and ask your question to me.
Madam Speaker, I applaud the idea that parents have control to what books and media their children have access for. Why should some other parents control what my child can see?
Okay, about a minute to answer.
I don't think other parents should control what your child can see. I think that if you want your child to see pornography, you should have to seek it out. I should not have to jump through hoops to prevent my child from seeing it. You are free to seek it out. I do not have to trust that my education system will do this job for me. I just ask to be able to do it for myself, for my children.
Okay, and a second question from Helena. Helena?
Hi, Madam Chair. My question is, who is it's similar backing on Robin's question of who is making the decision or has the right to make a decision about what book is considered pornography by some and what books are about subjects that I do want my children to read.
I think that when Congress restricts access to the testimony because it's too pornographic to put across the public airwaves, that's a pretty good decision. And again, I should be able to stop my child from seeing it, and you are still able to get it to your child because you can buy those books in any regular bookstore. They don't have to be available in the school library where people are restricting parental access to it. And they're consciously hiding the access from school libraries from parents. But they're still available. And if you want those for your children, you can go get them.
I think Rachel is frozen. Somebody needs to pick that up.
Hello, this is the vice chair stepping in very briefly for the chair. Let's go to another question from Heather Chapman.
I apologize. I didn't hear you. I thought we got disconnected or something.
There was a very brief disconnect. Yes. How did
Sorry.
everybody? I'm the vice chair. I'm stepping in very briefly for the chair. Once she's back, we will resume normal programming. But let's go to another question from Heather Chapman. Heather, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask the speaker if she would distinguish between a public library and a school library in terms of the power that parents have to dictate what books are on the shelves.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I would speak again to limited space. Our public libraries cannot possibly hold every book that is ever written. And I think that to pick and choose what especially goes in the children's section is vitally important. And if those books are available in an adult section, then it is the parents' prerogative to restrict their children's access to it, absolutely. But personally, I believe that with the limited space available, let's fill it with generally really good stuff.
Thank you. And with that, the speaker and questioners are thanked. Thank you all very much. Madam Chair, is your audio on?
Yeah, this is like the worst night of my chair life technology-wise, but you all are wonderful. So we're going to move to our next speaker. Our speaker in the affirmative is Bruce Pomerantz. Bruce, you can unmute and you have up to 4 minutes.
What was the last name?
Pomerantz.
Pomerantz.
Okay.
Another guy.
Oh God, it's not working.
Retired librarian.
Okay.
There you are. Hey.
Two definitions, two of my own definitions. Banning is proactive repression, and censorship is reactive repression of ideas. For brevity, I am going to use censorship as an action that encompasses banning also. Because the resolution includes public libraries, which have no grade or age limitations, I am going to present a very broad view on this topic, because while the individual speakers who want to see more guidance, shall we say, on children's reading, this does not apply to those censors with political agendas who reject all boundaries. Idea suppression will affect every aspect of our lives and communities. All media are subject to censorship, and censorship will occur in all the arts. Even toddlers will be affected when their parents or guardians' choices of materials for their child is restricted. My position is that censoring by different factions on diverse topics is becoming normative in our country. And once it becomes a frequent, normal occurrence in our country, then it's only a matter of which faction achieves overwhelming dominance in censorship that leads inevitably to tyranny. Because when censoring permeates the entire society, thought control occurs. We need only to look to Vladimir Putin's Russia to see thought control in action. I hopefully speculate that this audience knows that independent media organizations, non-government organizations, and individuals whose thoughts and peaceful actions oppose the Russian government's actions face restrictions or outright closure, and citizens are tried and convicted as enemies of the state, the most virulent form of censorship. Even describing the war against Ukraine as anything other than a special military operation is a crime. Now, I will provide a comprehensive list of examples of diverse groups attempting censorship in the United States. No, I won't. In an earlier draft, I began listing the numerous censoring efforts of groups I found they span the political spectrum. And there are just too many instances to mention within 4 minutes. And giving a few examples does not expose the enormity of the problem. Which censorious effort you become aware of depends on the transitory issue of the day and your interest in that topic. Search your preferred topic with permutations of incidents of groups opposed to or call for banning or removing materials or stop speakers or stop performances or opposed academic classes or a specific faculty. Search and be afraid of the results. Be very afraid. Current and aspiring dictators know that thought control is one of the strongest weapons against a population's freedoms, and that is achieved starting with censorship, but does not end with censorship, and that it begins at the cradle. Convince the population of accepted wisdom, and they will identify the dissidents. Emily Dickinson explains this succinctly. Much madness is divinest sense to a discerning eye. Much sense, the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority in this as all prevail. Assent, and you are safe. And I will inject safe in quotation marks. Demur, you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain. We will all end in physical or mental chains or both if censorship and its attendant tyranny prevails. Thank you.
All right. Hands for our speaker. And I'll take a couple of questions. Heather Chapman, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
Madam Chair, thank you. I would like to ask the speaker in light of the fact that sixth graders are around 11 or 12 years old, and that the age of consent in most states is somewhere between the ages of 6 to 18 years of age, and the federal guide on obscenity basically makes illegal the transfer of obscene matter to a minor under 16 years of age. How does he square those facts? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. About a minute to answer.
Well, first of all, I don't think that you actually asked me what I mentioned and forewarn people about. You're asking me about a specific situation with children, and there's already been speakers talk to that point. But I am trying to forewarn everyone about where we are going in this country. And that's what that's where I'm going to end. I'm not going to answer your question, your specific question, but because it did not address what I talked about.
Okay, I'll take another question from Susan.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I appreciate and pretty much sympathize with the eloquent words of our speaker. But I wonder, and he may not like this question, but I'm wondering if there would be, he'd appreciate a compromise in that materials that are objectionable to many parents, if they are held in a controlled area of a library and could be accessed with parental permission. Would the speaker consider that censorship, or is that okay?
Okay, about a minute to answer.
A parent can accompany their child into the library, unlike in school, where you have to have permission to go and observe your child, I assume. And that parent can go with the child and guide that child. There doesn't have to be a separate section. The parent or guardian is going to see what the child is interested in and will say no or yes. You don't have to have a separate section. You just need a parent or guardian to accompany the child.
That didn't address the question of school libraries, I'm sorry, but that was my only thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were just talking about public libraries.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Okay. Again, when you talk about separate sections, how are you going to read a child's mind? You have children who can, not by age and not by grade, be able to comprehend difficult thoughts and issues. And are you going to prevent that child simply because they're put off under another section and tell that child, oh, watch it, this is dangerous? They're going to be afraid to explore. So if you have it available to everyone, then everyone can decide on their own individual choice whether to approach that subject or not.
All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. We're going to move to our next speaker on the negative side, and that will be Jessie Manisto. Jessie, you have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I'm a pretty staunch free speech advocate. So when I thought about this issue, which interests me a lot, I wasn't quite sure at first whether I should be arguing in the affirmative or the negative. But I acknowledge that there may be some time where a book might not be appropriate for a public library, especially in the youth section or in a school library. And so I am forced to argue in the negative, as much as I see nuance, and I think that people on the other side have made some really good points. So here's what I want to put out there to understand this issue and to contribute to the discussion. I think, what's really going on between sort of clickbaity topics sometimes about book bans, which I don't think I'm advocating for book banning, but what I am thinking about is a collection development policy at a library. I have a master's degree in library science. I took the collection development class. I never actually used it, to be fair, but my mom was the director of my small town, hometown public library. So I've talked to her a lot about this, and that informs my view here. As one of the previous speakers noted, a library can't have every single book. Librarians always are curating. And as we've had another librarian here speaking, like librarians tend to really support freedom of information, as they should. But there's still choices made. And so how do we curate? To what end? Whose needs are met? Ideally, it should fit community standards, but when there's a conflict in the community, that's hard to do. There's going to be fights. So we're not going to agree on every single title. But my point that I want to put forward is that what a library purchases and makes available, I'd love to see it cover everything within the Overton window in both directions. But there's probably some exceptions to that, especially for kids sections and doubly so for school libraries. But you need a collection policy. You need to stick to it on both sides. So what do I think maybe shouldn't be there, even for the people who are rightly opposed to censorship in general? Consider maybe if there was a book advocating self-harm or suicide, maybe we don't want to have that in a youth section and it's aimed at kids, you know. It seems like there's some weird stuff being written these days. There was 13 Reasons Why is in most libraries, but that was a controversial book. Most people chose to put that in the library, but maybe a community decides that's not right for them and they don't want to spend money and space on something like that, or a worse version of that, right? You can imagine that. Another book, The Anarchist Cookbook. It's a book on how to make bombs. I looked up my hometown library and where I look now, and actually my hometown library carries a copy of this in the adult section, so you can go check out how to make books. So, but my local library does not. So maybe something like that would be against a collection development policy, and I think there's a justifiable reason for that. So that's why I'm thinking I have to say, is that a censorship? Then we get, of course, to something that has been raised by many people here, and I think fairly so, and that's the question of sexually explicit images, which communities have strong opinions on, and that's become, a hot topic these days. With obviously one of the books that people may have heard of is one called Genderqueer, which has an explicit image in it, and it's marketed toward the young adult, right? That's 6th through 12th grade, roughly. So if parents want kids to just be able to go and explore and they trust that that's not going to be there, is that the norm in that community, or is that somehow violating the trust of that community? And I think that is a fair question, and if there were a policy pre-written on that, it wouldn't trouble me for the community to be able to make that policy. Now, I asked my mom about that. What did my hometown community do about that? Even though it's a YA book, they purchased a copy of it, but they put it in the adult section. So that's how they tried to make a compromise on that issue. I do think one of the arguments I've heard some people make on this is that, well, teens can go online and see anything. They can get really scary pornography on the internet. Why are we worried about the library?
And that's our time. So if you can wrap up.
Oh, sure. I want to say that those kids probably would prefer to have some place where it's important to be able to transgress as a young person, but it's also important to set norms. And so a collection development policy could emphasize the norms of the community, and not everything would necessarily fit that. Thank you.
All right, hands for our speaker. I'll take a couple of questions. I see Eileen. Eileen, you can ask your question to me.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'd like to know, what are the responsibilities of the authors of these books and the publishers? Is there any requisite when an author wants to publish a book? How does the author suggest to whomever, I want this book to be for 9 to 12 year olds, or does the author have nothing to do with it, and once the librarian has curated a book, they make the decision where it goes, not talking to the publisher, not talking to the author about it?
Okay. Yeah, I think we get the sense of it. Jesse, would you like to respond?
Sure. I'm not in publishing, but based on what I know of libraries, the library was able to make the decision that a book is appropriate in this or that section. And so the librarian would have the ultimate decision, though the publisher could, again, decide what they market it toward.
Mm-hmm. All right. Another question for Jesse. Alice, do you have a question for this speaker? You can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and to Ms. Manisto. I have a question. I'm so glad to be able to ask this of a librarian. Given that I'm a very strong free speech advocate and a far left Democrat and a lesbian feminist, I'd like to know what you think of the following. This is a little bit different twist on this. I'm in one of the bluest counties in the country, and I went to the library and requested a book called Gender Hurts by Sheila Jeffries. Gender Hurts, a feminist analysis of the politics of transgenderism.
Alice, can you make this into a concise question?
Sorry. So what do you think of the fact that my library only has 2 gender critical books and has 1,211 books pertaining to transgenderism?
All right, about a minute to answer, Jesse.
Yeah, Ellis, thanks for that question. And I actually really sympathize and agree with you on that. I would like to see the policy on something. Again, I mentioned the Overton window. Yes, we need to have the argument, the books in there on, you know, the ones that they have the 1,000 books on, but they need to have the views of the other side, which is a legitimate view held in society right now by many people. The book Trends, Where Ideology Meets Reality by Helen Joyce, who's not some crazy person. She's the editor. She worked for The Economist as an editor. And there were reports in the United Kingdom of librarians taking that off the shelf. They weren't banning it. It was in the library, but you had to go ask for it so no one would stumble across it. So when I say collection policy, I'd like to just have librarians set that and try their hardest to abide by it regardless of their personal views. And if certain things, like again, self-harm, you know, sexually explicit stuff maybe is ruled out, and otherwise try to represent both sides of any current issue, just like we would do at Braver Angels, right? So I really sympathize with what you're saying. I agree that to me personally, that's a problem.
Thank you. And with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, we'll move to another affirmative speech from Corey Zech, or Zek. Are you here?
It's Zach, actually.
Zek. Okay, great. Corey, you have up to 4 minutes.
Okay. So I'm actually going to argue the free speech point that the previous speaker was making. And I probably won't take the whole 4 minutes, but basically all I really wanted to say is that when you start trying to censor and ban books simply because you don't like the material in them, that becomes a huge problem. And it's, in my personal belief, starts to infringe on that author's right to free speech. Writing is a form of free speech. We, as authors, I used to write a long time ago. I am very much a proponent of public libraries being just that, public. It becomes, when you start talking about school libraries, specifically when you start talking about that middle school to high school range, there's a lot of other conversations to be had. I've heard the point brought up where that should be on the parents, and let that be them. And I agree and don't agree with that. But my main point is the free speech part of it. You should not be able to ban or censor a book just because you don't like the material. And some people would argue that there are plenty of books out there that have this kind of material. I know one that comes to mind is a book called Mein Kampf. I don't know if anybody, I'm sure people know what that book is, but I think that it's important for us to have access to material like that. Of course, you wouldn't give that to a 6th grader, but a high schooler, 11th, 12th grade, I don't see an issue with that. But it's tailoring material to the age of the reader is okay, but you don't start censoring it. And that's where we need to put more emphasis on the parental part of that. I think if we're not going to let the librarians do what they do, then parents need to have more of an interest in it. It's sad to see that a lot of the books that I read when I was in school, a perfect example is To Kill a Mockingbird. That book is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal book. A lot of school libraries have banned it. For what reason? I really don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with the racism aspect of it. But I think it's important for our children to read books like that because it teaches them that these things exist. And I personally do not believe in shielding my children. I have a high schooler and a 7th grader and a 3rd grader. And we just got library cards. And it would be sad to me if my kids couldn't get access to certain material because of the decisions of others. I don't think that's fair to them. I don't think it's fair to the authors because the authors put in lots of work. They use their own imagination. Some tell real stories. And the right to free speech trumps everything, in my personal view. And when you start taking that freedom away, you start encroaching on what another point that one of the other speakers was talking about was thought control. When you start encroaching on that and start taking that ability to free think and use our free speech away, it becomes a very, very big problem in my personal opinion. So I'll end right there.
All right, hands for our speaker. I'll take a couple of questions. Corey, would you unmute and ask your question to the chair?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is starting with, I accept that we are intuitively against censorship and censoring people's speech in particular. But if there are controversies, if there are questions in the communities, then in a democratic society with multiple different opinions, is there any acceptable process or principles that would allow people to come together, hash out those disagreements amongst teachers, amongst students, amongst parents, so that we can get to a standard that at least everyone can accept?
All right, about a minute to respond, Corey.
The short answer to that is I believe that if parents took a more vested interest in their kids' education, particularly when we're talking about schools, I think that we could, in an idyllic society, braver angels, the way that we do things would work with anything if we applied it. Particularly if we used things like this where people could voice their disagreements, and then we could find that common ground, and then we could come to a solution.
Thank you. I'll take one more question. Sherry Gravely, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
I'm going to pass on this one. I might do a speech in a minute. Go ahead with someone else.
Okay, Diane Verosky. And if you can unmute, Diane. Yeah, you'll still need to unmute. There you go, to ask your question to the chair.
I am in total violent agreement with the speaker.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
And I think, and I just want to admire her for what she's saying, because the bottom line is, when I was a kid 80 years ago,
do you have a question? It's a question time. Do you have a question for the speaker?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. All right, thank you. I will take one more question from Isaac. Isaac, do you have a question for the speaker?
Hi, yes. Thankfully, it's the speaker that mentioned the subject that I want to talk to. So my question to Corey, it's like a two-half question. First, have you ever read Mein Kampf?
Has she ever read? Mm-hmm.
Mein Kampf.
In third person, yeah. Okay, and
the second question, if she had, would she be agreed to pay from our tax money for something like that, which is free on the internet, to be in a 6 years old accessibility read? I read the whole book when I was 19. It's horrible.
Yeah, and our resolution, it does start about 6th grade. That's what we're talking about. Corey, go ahead.
So, in full transparency, I know the gist of Mein Kampf. I have never actually read it because I have not cared to access it for a lot of reasons, most of them personal. But yes, I do think that giving access to that within reason, we have to be reasonable. I am talking, not 6 years old, not even 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. That's more of a high school level, and you're talking 11th or 12th grade if you're doing it in high school at all. So no, I have not read it. I wouldn't care to read it just because of the author, but I do know the gist of it, and I think it should be available so that history doesn't repeat itself, is the short version of that answer.
All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, we're moving to a speech in the negative, and on my list, I see Jared Smith. Jared, are you ready and willing to speak?
Yes, I am.
Great, you have up to 4 minutes.
Okay, so I'd like to kind of just take a bit of a more nuanced approach to this. I want to start out with a couple questions. And the first one is, do children and adolescents know what is best for them? Is all information appropriate for children and adolescents to consume? And what role do we have as parents, teachers, and members of our community to influence our children's education? And so I think these are things that are worth thinking about. A child, for example, they don't know that touching a stove is going to burn them, and it might look interesting, and they're curious to know why that thing is glowing, right? And so they go and reach, and there's two ways that they can find that out. The first is if they touch it and they experience it and they realize, oh, that's hot, that burns me. But the other way is, we tell them because we have the experience and we have the know-how and we don't want them to hurt themselves. I think we've heard some really good points here. And we are talking about 6th grade and up. And I just think, there is some information that isn't appropriate for children because children don't have the maturity or the ability to process that information, whether it's information about suicide or if it's sexually explicit stuff that is just not something that they're able to fully understand, I guess, the future consequences of that if they act on it. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that, I love having book clubs. I love reading, but something that's super helpful for some really controversial books is when you're able to have a discussion and you're able to pull it apart together. I think that it's important that we don't give access to people, that we don't give access to children literature that is really difficult for them to understand unless they have good guidance. And I also wanted to say that I think the way by which we ban books, or and I'm speaking especially for children in school libraries, the way by which we ban books is important. I think it needs to be democratic, meaning that it should be locally discussed. When you give government the power to limit and control information, I mean, history has taught us that it does not go well. And so I think the important thing here is that the communities are very involved in their children's education, and they're also involved in what their community cares about. And so really, I think we need to find some ways to make the voice of the people heard. And so that the responsibility for what kind of books are in these libraries, that rests on the heads of the people and not on the heads of the government, because the government is over a vast amount of people with a vast amount of opinions. But it's part of the genius of the democracy we live in is that people can be represented in their communities. And so that's kind of my view. I would say that I think we do need to be careful, but we need to have discussions about these things because there are certain things that are simply not appropriate for children to consume when they're young and immature. Thank you.
Thank you. Hands for our speaker, and we'll take a couple of questions. Chris Martin, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question would be, does the speaker think that the speaker brought up several dangerous sort of or dangerous ideas, such as one of them was suicide, I believe, depictions of suicide. Does the speaker believe that a depiction of a suicide in a book would be enough to induce a child or an adult to go through with that act versus internal beliefs, feelings, the internal states of that person would override those, a depiction in terms of I guess enacting those? Would the depiction be really the deciding factor?
Okay, about a minute to answer.
I don't think that would be something so serious. I think really the serious thing is when it's literature that is almost encouraging it or trying to, I guess, get someone into that headspace when they already aren't, or take someone vulnerable. I think we know it happens, but to encourage is a different thing.
Okay, thank you. We'll take one more question. Trying to read your name. Barry Van? Barry Tamsin?
You can call me Barry.
Okay, great. Yeah, go ahead now. Ask your question to the chair.
Okay, thank you. So, Madam Chair, my question is, I do agree that children are socio-emotional at a place where certain information like sexually explicit or self-harm books could be are inappropriate. And it makes me wonder about rating systems like the movies where we have G, PG, PG-13, and R. On that line, though, when we consider free access to information and the internet, regardless of certain parental controls, students are flooded with information that they might have been previously. And how do we create a safe space for them to talk about this information that they're gathering that's also respectful to community norms?
Okay, about a minute to answer.
I think that the best place for children to talk about these things that they see, because I mean the internet is just so full of information. I think the best place, honestly, it starts in the home, where they're able to have these discussions with, you know, their family members. I think that's ideal. Unfortunately, not everyone has that, I guess, ideal situation. And I think that's kind of where we get the whole phrase, it takes a village, you know, to raise a child. And so, I mean, I think it can get difficult when I guess public officials are brought into it, because I don't necessarily know that it's always a very effective place for them to be doing those things. But I really think that there should be community efforts to be able to make it so that I guess we are able to help children understand these things. But really, I think it starts in the family. So that's what I would say.
All right, and with that, our speaker is thanked. All right, we're going to speech in the affirmative. Robbie Weirman, are you ready to speak, Robbie?
I am. Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Good, you have up to 4 minutes.
I'm talking about not banning or censoring. I just think it's an ineffective tactic. It's a very important subject. It's quite complicated. I think it's being extreme in the media and different things. I think my core value that I can talk about is my desire to protect or sometimes even shield my child from ideas or things that seem so diverse from the way that I live, because I don't want them to get hurt. But I think the influence of media, movies, friends, internet, and actually in some families can take them away from my own personal values, because I know people that have had tough things that have happened to them in many of those different arenas. So I joined a banned book club here in my local community. I learned a bit. I learned that banned books typically have things around race, relations, identity, race history, about sex. Sex seems to be a very hot topic in this discussion about sexual identity, sexual exploration. So then I said, okay, well, what about me? What was I doing at 11 and 12? And I hate to say it, but it was a half a century ago. Okay. So half a century ago, when I was that age, people were having sex. I hate to admit it, but they were. And I didn't even know the first thing about my own anatomy. So I went to my mother and I said, what's this about? And she gave me a book for teens. Here you are, why don't you read it? And she gave me a book for the parent to talk to their child about the book. She gave me both. She said, read it. Let me know if you have a question, come back. And I'll tell you, as an 11 and 12-year-old, I did not want to ask my mother one question out of that book, no matter how much she loved me. So back then, banned books were The Scarlet Letter and To Kill a Mockingbird when I was that age, but I didn't have discussions with my parents about it. When my daughter was at that age, Twilight and Harry Potter were the banned books. And I know she was probably seeing things on the internet that I couldn't believe in. And I'm sure there was still people having sex at that age, because I didn't think things had gotten less in 50 years. So I then joined my banned book club and so anyway, I read the Twilights and all the Harry Potters, and we discussed them together if she had any questions. So I joined my banned book club. The top two about sexuality were genderqueer, which people have mentioned, and All Boys Aren't Blue. I read them both. I learned a lot. Both of these authors had very supportive parents. They had strong family backgrounds. Both were written from a sense of self. Let me tell you what I went through. I know how hard it is to be a kid who's 11 and 12 or 13. We, at that time, are going through cognitive, emotional, and social growth at a new level that we never had as children, as adolescent children. And if I could have read that book with my daughter when she was 11 or 12, and some of it was uncomfortable, but it was okay, because at least I knew I was looking at these things with her, and I could discuss what I did know and I didn't know. Even as a 62-year-old person now, there are things that I'm still learning about what kids go through. So I believe books actually are a really safe and effective way to open up and discuss what may be uncomfortable discussions and subjects and realities that people are exposed to in the world that we live in today. And I'd like to be part of, sorry, but a trusting and loving environment that we can come together, again, like braver angels, and find ways to discuss very difficult things in our society. So,
all right, and that's our time. Thank you very much. Hands for our speaker, and I'll take a couple of questions. One from Angel Oakley. Angel, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Hi, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the speaker if she thinks that there should be a distinction between public library and school libraries. For public libraries, obviously parents can bring their child and they can seek out books that might be best to share with their child. But then in a school library, they may have no idea what's being shared.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Great question. I don't know about school libraries, so I'm not an expert on that. And I really can't speak to it. In our group at the library, what we did talk about was free speech. We talked about what's available, that how parents, just by giving a kid a library card, you're giving them access. So if you don't want your child to be reading certain books, as an adult, you need to know that you need to decide when they get a library card. I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting thing. But I can't speak to the children at the library schools.
Yeah, okay.
I've never researched it.
Thank you. I'll take another question from Heather Chapman. You can unmute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope I can make this short. I very much resonate with the emotional content of the speaker's speech, and I very much value the experience of books and how different people can be portrayed in a way that humanizes them, brings you into their world, and opens up your mind. I also personally am not a religious person, but
So
before this, well, I just wanted to say that I took the liberty to listen to a school board meeting that was filmed, which involved parents from Dearborn, Michigan, a lot of whom were devout Muslims. And they were very upset about the contents of materials used in their school's curriculum and their libraries. So I'm just asking,
sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
would you feel comfortable? Would you feel comfortable exposing a highly religious person's child to sexual content, which is essentially what has been happening in some of these school districts?
Okay, about a minute to answer.
Yeah, my core answer would be that choosing to live in America, and that we have the First Amendment with the right to free speech. I'm just saying that there's a value in that of inclusivity, right? So there's this inclusivity that we agree to when we become American citizens. And we are a country not founded on religion, but some religious beliefs, in that, at least in my family, we are all honored as humans and all treated equally, but not the same. So I can't speak for the Muslim religion, or you could talk about a Jewish, or you could talk about the Seventh-day Adventists in my husband's family. You know, they're so varied. And all I can say is in my own experience, and I know it's not a book, but I had all the kids over to my house and we sat around with, you know, eating spaghetti or pizza or whatever. And kids have questions even about religion that they love to talk about in an open place. So I guess I'm saying, yeah, I'm open that that is part of the free speech we have in this society. And
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, our speaker is thanked. Moving to a speech in the negative from Wilkinson. Wilk, are you with us and ready to give a speech?
Always.
All right, you got up to
No,
4 minutes.
just a joke. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do appreciate the time, and I appreciate the time all the speakers tonight have taken. I mean, there's been some incredible points made. You know, Jared brought up some of the things that I was going to bring up, but I'm going to bring them up in a bit of a different way. You know, the idea that, you know, we as parents obviously have to be the ultimate safeguard for what our children are and are not exposed to. You know, when I think of the hot stove analogy, it's actually one that I've used, and it is so important that we as parents take that responsibility and take it to the ultimate, in that when it comes to the innocence of a child, you know, if a child burns their hand on a stove, that hand will most likely heal. They will learn something from it, but that hand will heal. Maybe a little bit of emotional trauma from it, but the innocence of a child once lost, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. You cannot make a child unsee what they've seen in many of these cases, and to expose children to sexually explicit material does, whether it's children or not, it does very intense things to the brain. It releases endorphins. It does, and it does some of the especially to the adolescent brain, does some of things that just can't be undone. When I think of, you know, my responsibility as a parent, you know, if my child uh if my child wants whiskey and licorice for dinner every day, it's my job as a parent to say, no, that's not happening. You know, it's not happening. They can't do that. And that's not me banning whiskey and licorice, because I like it. It's here. But I'm not going to give it to my kid. And that's something that they would recover from, you know, shortly after they got done throwing up. I will not allow a school system that my children are forced to attend, because, you know, this is another thing that boggles my mind, is many of the same people, and in most cases, in almost all respects, I'm a free speech absolutist, and there is nothing in this conversation tonight in my mind that stands in contrast to the First Amendment. Nobody is talking about jailing publishers for publishing books like All Boys Are Blue or whatever that one is, or the other ones that have been brought up tonight. That would be a total infringement upon the First Amendment. That's not what's talked about here today. When children are forced to go to school, a public school, and when I say they're forced, you can call it forced or not call it forced, but when we're forced to pay taxes, and then our kids or parents are then subject to legal penalties for not putting our kids in the public school system, and we don't have the choice to do it. Some of the strongest proponents or people that fight against school choice are some of the same people that are trying to put this type of pornographic material into the schools' libraries. And that you can't have it both ways. You can't tell a parent that, no, we are not going to allow you to have a say in what's in the libraries in these schools, but we are going to force you to send your kid to this school.
And we're getting to about time, so wrap up.
So yeah, this is something I could go on for a long time. I just think that again, free speech absolutist, but this is not a free speech issue. This is a matter of innocence lost, and what are you going to allow your kid to see and be exposed to, especially when it's stuff that can't be undone, it can't be unseen. Hangovers go away, the deviant mind gets a mess. It's a mess that can't be undone.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the reminder about the First Amendment. That's much appreciated. Tom, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I remember reading The Catcher in the Rye, Huckleberry Finn, and what great books they had on me. So I have two questions for this previous speaker. Number one is, at what age is it okay for preteens to make the choice as to what books to read, in your opinion?
And?
Age 11, 12, 13? And
Okay.
the second
your second
question is, yes, should parents have control over what a school board decides, what books to put into a school library?
Okay, you got about a minute to answer briefly.
So, in answer to the questioner's first question, at what age does a child get to decide what books they're going to read and not read? I think that's very much a decision that has to be upon the parent as much as anything else. I think we've decided as a society, we talk about societal norms. We for all intents and purposes allow children to move out of their parents' homes at 18. I moved out younger than that. I know others that did as well. Everything that I did prior to moving out of my parents' house, I had to have my parents' permission. Children are not allowed to make decisions like that, nor should they be. I think that's something that the parents, and it really comes down to parental involvement. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in our society today that don't take enough involvement in their children and the different things that they consume. But that is a parental thing. Second question.
Sorry. Yeah, that's about our time. So just a brief note on the second question.
I was just going to say, second question. Yeah, parents do have a responsibility, a right and a responsibility to become involved in the school board. We pay the taxes; they work for us. Period.
Yeah, the question had to do with control.
With that, our speaker is thanked. We are going to take a stretch right now. You might have a stretch, walk around a little bit. You're doing great. This is fascinating. In a minute, we're going to move to 2-minute speeches. And a 2-minute speech is half the length of a 4-minute speech, which means it's an opportunity for us to be super concise and make like one point or one personal experience. We have a bunch of people lined up to speak, and I don't think we're going to get to everybody much as we would like to. So that's why we're moving to 2-minute speeches, and we'll take maybe one question after each one. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is really listen to what is coming before you and try to respond so that we have a conversation. Because we're not going to call on a question for a rebuttal speech. We're pretty strict about that. But let's have speeches that really go back and forth and interact. I would also like to hear a little bit more about books related to race or books related to LGBTQ. And a little bit away from the pornography, which we have discussed quite a bit. So that's where we're going right now. So our next speaker, I'm looking at my list here. And again, we're going to 2-minute speeches. So really just put a point on it. Sarah Calvin, you are up and show us how it's done.
Hi, yes, I'm from Vermont. I'm a current college student. I am a lot younger than most of the speakers we've had this far, so I think I can offer an interesting viewpoint. I just took a class in children's literature, and we discussed the idea of censorship quite heavily. And one of the negatives of censoring books is children don't have access to viewpoints other than their own. Children, especially, I'm from one of the whitest states in the nation. We had maybe 2 people that weren't white in like my entire school. And, you know, if everything is homogeneous, everyone looks like you, thinks like you, talks like you, how are you going to get an idea once you go out in the world of what other ideas exist? And I think it is very important that the United States was founded on this principle of having other ideas. So I think that's a very important point to make. I would also like to bring up talking about books being censored. I've heard stories of children figuring out that they were being sexually assaulted because of books that they saw in the library. I have heard of children realizing that they have a different gender identity, and a lot of that stuff isn't discussed in our homes. I have friends that come from extremely Christian families, figured out they're LGBTQ, figured out they have different views than their parents, and a lot of that has come from discussions. It has come from reading these books, and without the opportunity to read this information, we lose out on that. So yeah, thank you.
Well done, coming in under 2 minutes. I'm impressed. Hands for our speaker. I'm going to take just one question, and I'm going to be looking for people who haven't asked a question yet or haven't spoken. So I'm going to be watching for those hands. Maybe there's someone who hasn't spoken yet or hasn't asked a question that has one. All right, I'll take a question here from Colin. Colin, go ahead and ask your question to me.
So this has to do with censorship that I've observed like out in the wild. It has to do with the taking down of the letter to America by The Guardian because of a TikTok trend of all things. So how would you deal with trends where people are sympathizing with terrorists, for example, like Osama bin Laden? Because I guess I can see it in a way that they're deprived of the counter arguments where people are TikToking saying that, oh yeah, Osama bin Laden was correct, and the whole politics of like current events as well. Like, how do you respond to that example of the Guardian censoring the letter to America?
Okay, Sarah, you have a minute. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. I think there are obviously extremes in every situation, and if we're talking about children specifically, it is not wise to expose people under a certain age group to that extreme. That being said, I think that children have a lot bigger capacity to understand than we're given credit for. My brother and I could understand quite complex things when we were in high school. Specifically relating to terrorists, though, and I'll wrap this up quickly. I think that that is something that should be discussed within the community. Generally, we can agree that terrorism is bad, and I think that make sure that people know that terrorism's bad, but censoring it doesn't really help. I hope that answers.
Thank you. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Our next speaker is going to be Rachel Aguirre. Did I get that right, Rachel?
Rachel Aguirre. Hi.
Aguirre. Great. And you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
I am a teacher in the public school system. And I will tell you that I wanted to touch on a couple bases, things that were discussed. First of all, we talk about censorship. If you look at the 45 Rules of Communism that was written in 1963, number 6 says, eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and violation of free speech. Number 7 says, their goal is to break down the cultural standard of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in the media. So when we talk about communism, those are goals that the communist government has and was wanting to do in order to break down the American society. Second of all, when we provide students with books that have pornographic material or other material, they're not focused on the context of the book. They're looking for the next sexual act going on. And so therefore, we are providing a book that helps groom our children. For example, here in Kansas City, the highest rate of aggressive assaults, sexual assaults, are from boys 11 to 18 years old. And when you look at the American Center for Pediatrics, they are very clear that the effects of pornography on children affect negatively the mental health of our children. And what are we all talking about? We're always talking about social emotional learning and all this stuff. Well, you know what? Let's start putting positive things in their minds. As for To Kill a Mockingbird, To Kill a Mockingbird is about history. It's about where our country was and how people were unfairly treated, and how we learn from that. It does not teach people to be racist. It teaches people how Black Americans were treated unfairly. When we're talking about the books that we are getting right now and that we are introducing to our children, and we're talking minors, we don't give them guns, we don't give them drugs, we don't have drug needles available in case a minor wants to do drugs.
And that's about time.
We have a fentanyl crisis in our country, and yet we're too busy making sure that they know how to have sex.
That's about time. Thank you.
Well, Gays Against Groomers are against all of this too.
Thank you. A question from Gary. You can unmute, Gary. Ask your question to the chair. Gary, you'll want to unmute. There you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Back to some of the previous speaker. I did read Mein Kampf, and it didn't.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We're on the particular speaker that we are.
Okay, yeah, I'll ask a question of her. If exposing children to damaging information, like I said, I read Mein Kampf. I think it's a parent's duty.
What's your question?
The parent's duty to make, in my opinion, and ask her if it's a parent's duty to make sure that they read the right things, not the school district.
Okay, you got about a minute to respond. Rachel, unmute, please. There you go.
We are parents, and there's a reason. There are children. As an educator, my job is to provide academic success to students. My job is not to teach them political or social agendas. I can have discussions with them so that they can come to have their own thought process. But yes, I don't want someone else trying to tell my kids to contradict what their parents say. And unfortunately, in our school system, that's exactly what's going on. I can tell you a specific example here in our school district, where a young girl was dealing with her sexual identity. The parents were very clear to the school that they do not want them allowing her to have a boy's name, but yet behind their back, they did. And the mom found out because a paper fell out of her book bag that had Max on it. And not only that, but then the school counselor provided her with a book about transitioning. And there again, parents, and this is why parents need to be involved in our school districts. This is not about showing favoritism towards a student. We are here to protect all children.
Thank you very much. With that, the speaker is thanked. If it feels like we are moving fast, we are. Our next speaker is going to be Jesse Waters. Jesse, you have up to 2 minutes.
Hey folks, I'm Jesse Waters, director of the Bowers Writers House at Elizabethtown College, and I want to talk about two things that I've seen come up quite a bit here. One, first off, pornography. Our government has batted this around so frequently and so often, and I would direct my good and gentle colleagues on the negative side to take themselves back to 1964 when Justice Potter, when being asked to defend the definition of pornography, was only able to say, quote unquote, "I know it when I see it." And to define these particular books or these experiences as pornographic is also to then, by association and ancillary definition, to tell individuals of our population who are involved with those life experiences that they themselves too are pornographic. This cannot happen in an advanced democracy. And if we want to have an advanced democracy, which is my second point, it cannot come from the slippery slope of deciding that certain areas of experience can or cannot be experienced by our citizens. And I would again remind our good and gentle folk on the, my good and gentle colleagues on the negative side, that our children are citizens. And if we wish them to come up in this advanced democracy, then we must lay out the buffet of experiences for them at every possible juncture, so that we as parents can then guide them through them. Take your children to the library. When you take your children and you cross them through traffic, before they understand the way traffic runs, do you simply say, hey, go ahead on out there and go play in traffic? No, you take them by the hand and instruct them. This is what the value of an all-inclusive society gives you parents the opportunity to do. And when you restrict those experiences, be they publicly oriented, be they academically oriented, what you don't recognize is you are denying yourself the ability to have that advanced citizenship conversation with your children. When they have an experience and can bring it home to you and say, I'm confused by this. This has hurt me. This has burned my hand on the stove. You are denying them the opportunity to then have that conversation with you and to then be true and genuine, authentic parents.
Thank you very much. Hands for our speaker. I'll take one question from Michelle. Michelle Goodwin, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Madam Chair, thank you. I would like to ask the speaker if it would be okay if parents were to, or the industry were to also present all the other things that are out there, like the heterosexual stories and the biblical stories, that also are part of this diversity, and recognize the right of the parents to present that and respect the parent as a responsible parent in that venue as well. Thank you.
About 1 minute to respond.
Absolutely 101%. And I would refer back to one of my other gentle colleagues on the negative side who presented the diagrammatic example of Mein Kampf. I'm a Jew. I've read Mein Kampf, and I read it very young. And when I read it and was confused by it, I then went to my Jewish parents to say, what in God's name is this? This created synergy between the relationship that I had with my parents. Everything should have the ability to be experienced by young people so that they can strategize for themselves with the assistance and support of their parents. When we only give them part of the piece of the intellectual or experiential pie, we are then telling them, I am only willing to dialogue with you about these certain things because these other categories of experiences and knowledge are verboten and unacceptable. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is un-American.
Thank you. And with that, the speaker is thanked. We're moving to our next speaker. And on my list, I have Sherry. Sherry, did you want to make a speech? Because I see you on my list. All right, you are up. You have up to 2 minutes.
Ready to go. Okay, banning. Let's all be honest. It's a word reds and blues have used kind of as cudgels against each other's. Liberals wanted to ban Mark Twain, Dr. Seuss, To Kill a Mockingbird. Conservatives wanted to ban genderqueer and lawn boy, right? And we've been all talking about high ideals. And I, like most of you, are against censorship and care a ton about freedom of speech, as people on my side have not had that luxury recently. But the core of this debate is actually based on something. It's based on the attacks on the Florida governor who banned explicit materials based on age. And we all know age is a reason to ban things. We don't let kids drive, smoke, own guns, have bank accounts, fly alone. So I think using the word banning is a logical fallacy. We actually know most adults agree that many of those books that we're actually talking about on Governor DeSantis's lists were books that people agree should be banned. Why? Well, first of all, local media cut the news feed when he explained the explicit content. We've seen multiple videos of boards that approve the books, but won't let a parent read from it or post the pictures. They all know it's not really appropriate, right? But when we know that, what are we doing? We're talking about young kids and how much sexual content should children under grade 6 be exposed to? We got to cut to the chase. This ban was about age. So high and lofty ideals, we may all have them. But what we need to be worried about is what our kids are, what they're sexualized and exposed to. And I think that's very fair for parents to do and very fair for schools to express that. It's not free speech banning to say that you can't look at a book when you're this age, especially when you know it's already printed in, like someone else said previously. Go ahead and order it for your children. That's absolutely fine. Our schools are supposed to be about academics, not sexualization. So that's my point of view.
All right, thank you. I'm going to take one question for Gary Zamolek. I see your hand raised. You can correct my pronunciation. Got to unmute, please. You can ask your question to the chair.
Your pronunciation was just fine, Madam Chair. Thank you. For this speaker, I want to say, how do we determine, I come from Iowa, and we have similar laws now to Florida's.
Okay, and your question?
Yes, my question is, would this speaker agree that a book like Slaughterhouse-Five should be banned from even high school libraries, as it has been in my state?
So actually, like I said, should I go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, like I said, I actually think that we're not really talking about the issue as it's been brought up in the Overton window, whatever you want to call it, in common parlance. What's been going on was the concept of banning books was used as a cudgel against, conservatives to some extent. And that wasn't the book that they were talking about banning. They were talking about very specific sexually explicit material. Okay. So we can all talk about like, hey, I love all those books and I want my kids to read lots of those. I don't want them reading the sexually exploitative, books that I like. Lawn Boy, I've read all of them. Genderqueer, Boys Are Blue, especially with the visuals and the graphics that are depicting. I don't want them seeing heterosexual sex depicted. I definitely don't want to see pedophilia, which a lot of those contain. So, we got to be careful. This debate is about something somewhat specific. High and lofty ideals, love them. We're adults. I'm talking about kids. And I might go older than grade 6, but that need to not be seeing this material.
Okay.
Sorry.
With that, speaker is thanked. Thank you. All right. Our next speaker is Eric Hamill. And I want to remind you in the last 10, 15 minutes or so of this part of the debate, let's look at other issues besides just pornography or sexually explicit books. Let's look at the wider thing as well. Eric Hamill, I have you on my list. Would you like to speak? Is Eric still here? All right. Then, are you here, Eric?
Hi, yes. What I'm going to say, I had experience with a political cult in my adolescence. And so I know firsthand the experience of milieu control. And I think, limiting what access children have to information is a form of milieu control. Cultism isn't only something fringe groups do. I also know from personal experience, over half a century ago, I read a sex farce when I was 10 years old. And I think if I was going to be traumatized by it, it would have happened by now. I'm not holding my breath. And I don't think any competent librarian would let children read about anything advocating or giving instructions for self-harm. I don't see how anyone's going to be harmed by learning about sex. That's my opinion based on my personal experience and also the scientific research that shows the only problem adolescent boys have with being exposed to pornography is worrying about what their parents would think. That's all I have to say.
All right. I'm going to say thank you to the speaker. Let's see, who is our next speaker? My staff says Isaac Freeman. Is that right, staff? That's the one I have on the list. Isaac, would you like to speak for 2 minutes?
Yes.
Did we miss a
Okay, you're
question
up.
for our speaker?
Nope, I'm moving on because we are almost out of time and I want to get a couple more speeches in. Thank you, though. Isaac, go.
So I want to make a few things clear first. One, private schools should not be even discussed in this matter. And public libraries also are a separate category because a public library serves the entire public. I want to speak specifically about public schools and the book that everyone mentioned here, not everyone, some people mentioned here, Mein Kampf. This book is available free online. You don't need to pay anything for it. Telling us that we need to take our tax money to pay for something, I cannot even read a paragraph from this book because it's so horrible, and everyone who reads it knows exactly what I'm saying. Like this is outrageous. Like to even think that we should have children access to it, like easy access. If they really want to read it, they can go online. No one would block them. It's free on Google. It's free on I think you can even order it on Amazon. And now specifically Mein Kampf is banned by countries, by actual countries. And all of those countries where it's banned, all of them are democratic. So there is no single, maybe Russia. Okay, Russia is the only non-democratic country where Mein Kampf is banned nationwide. So we have to ask ourselves, do we justify someone paying our tax money for something like that in school? Just read chapter 11. I cannot, there are some words I cannot repeat here because it's so horrible. Just read chapter 11 of Mein Kampf and tell me if you think that this book should be paid by tax money to be in a school, even high school, in a school library. I read it when I was 19 and for research, it was horrible.
And that's our time. Our speaker is thanked. Our next speech is Leslie Lopeta. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll talk fast. I feel a little bit like we've gone down the rabbit hole of pornography and focusing on pornography. And in fact, if you look at an organization called PEN America did an index of 648 titles that were banned, meaning that in some way their access was restricted in the 2021-22 school year. 41% explicitly addressed LGBTQ themes or had LGBTQ protagonists. 40% contained protagonists or prominent secondary characters of color. 21% directly address issues of race and racism. Of all those books, only 22% contained sexual content of various kinds, and that included novels with some levels of description of sexual experiences of teenagers, stories about teen pregnancy, assault, and abortion, as well as informational books about puberty, sex, or relationships. And when I learned that the book Everywhere Babies, I believe that's the title of it, had been restricted in some areas because two of the parents in this very delightful children's book were a gay male couple, which I hadn't even noticed, I really began to feel that things had gotten out of control. So, I think that pornography, to some extent, is a red herring in this discussion. That's not the main issue that's come up in banning of books. It's one of the issues, but it's not the main issue. And I think we're ignoring the fact that there are a lot of other serious issues that have been banned or restricted from access by even older children. Including in some cases up through high school. Thank you.
All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. Our next speaker, and before we close this part of the debate and go to our next exercise, our next speaker is Rita Chisholm. Rita, are you ready to speak? You have 2 minutes.
Oh, sorry, Cynthia. I'm in my car doing
there
this
you
on the
go.
road.
You have 2 minutes. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. I would want to begin by recommending Monica Guzman's latest podcast. And the topic was, it's how do we bridge the class divide? that it is a wonderful listen, and it is relative to what we're talking about here in some ways. In the school libraries, in a perfect world, I hear everyone, speak about their parents would be, your parents should take you and discuss this with you. I was blessed that I did have those kind of parents. Unfortunately, it is the underprivileged children that often have a lack of parenting at home because of different reasons. And for that reason, it's easy to say that they can bring these books home and speak to their parents, but in reality, that's not how it always happens. Also, I would like to, and this is something that we would go into in a different discussion, but when you begin to, and I know that pornography, I know that this is a wider topic, but the reality is that there's a lot of emphasis right now and a lot of concern about this very thing. The types of literature that the kids the sexual literature. And I want to say that we haven't talked much about the difference between boys and girls here. And I think that that's a very relative topic when you're talking about age and sexual exposure to images. And really, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
All right, Rita, under 2 minutes. That is amazing and wonderful. Good job, Rita. All right, and our speaker is thanked.